All right, everybody. Kevin Cohen is with us, our friend in Ukraine right now. He was relieved after the duty that he had as a medic in Ukraine and was not available for us to connect this morning. So we are still trying. We were still trying, and we are now together here on the screen. Hello, everybody. Hello,
Hello,
Kevin.
everyone. It's very nice to be back on the show again. I am tired, I smell bad, and I need a good meal, but that's not a complaint. Uh, Будеш перекладати?
Yeah, there will be no translation, no переклад. But I think that вы можете включить субтитры, друзья, если вы хотите слушать на русском языке. Попробуйте. Google делает неплохую работу на YouTube по синхронному переводу. Я не буду переводить Кевина, чтобы у нас слишком драгоценное время. И our time is too precious, Kevin, and the connection and the power, and we know what's going on in Ukraine, more or less. And you would like to talk about a very specific subject, which is, for starters, to tell us how we see the reports from the front lines. We see this article in today's Sunday New York Times, and we talked about it with you in private. And I mentioned it before, and this is an article by Thomas Gibbons Neff, and it's called, hold on a second, it's called In Ukraine, Killings of Surrendering Russians Divide an American-Led Unit. In Ukraine,
Yes,
killings of surrendering Russians divide an American-led unit.
yes,
Uh,
and may I? Can I interrupt?
sure, yes.
So the American-led unit is a very important part of understanding this article. This is not an article against Ukraine. It is an article against foreign volunteers. And it was written by someone whose previous biggest publication from Ukraine was about foreign volunteers. And it was incredibly critical. I would say that what he said in that article was probably true. The problem, it was factual, what he said in that article. He left out an enormous number of other facts that you need to see the truth around those facts. And I know that he knew the facts because I have spoken with him several times in Donbass, specifically around Bakhmut. He has even, he went on an evacuation with the civilian group Base UA that I worked with. So I know that he has the big picture. From that big picture, he chose a very, very small amount and clearly ignored everything else that he knew to write what I would call a hit piece on foreign volunteers. It's not about Ukraine. And I say all this to point out that it's important that the headline is that these killings divide an American-led unit.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand this. My problem was, if I may say so, in just to get you a moment to prepare for the next thing you want to say. I just wanted to say that they accompanied this article with a picture of the what looks like an index card,
Mhm.
and mm, this whole thing is saying something different. This index card is on the right, and it could be a trimmed page from a diary, but it doesn't matter. It has 001 number in the right upper corner, and it says, and it's highly unlikely to have a number like this on a diary, but it's possible. But it means that it's just the front page of this diary. and it's just like you buy a pack of the index cards, and you have this number on every page if it's an index card. But I never seen a diary that wouldn't have, say, its own calendar on every page, right? Just numbered pages. It's strange. It's more like an index card, and as such, it has only one word that is crossed out. This is the third line on the right. It's then instead of trench.
Mm-hmm.
Blendage has its written with a typo misspelling. It should be I
Because we
instead of
don't have
e.
the word in English. We have it in French, blindage. We have it in
Yeah.
Ukrainian, blindage. There's
Yes.
no American equivalent.
Yeah, but the guy who wrote it
This
is
is German.
presumably a German, right? He's mentioned as a German volunteer medic,
Yeah.
and surprisingly, for a fact that he's a foreigner writing in not his own tongue, he's writing it in English, and there are no mistakes, and punctuation and everything is quite in place, and the whole sheet, the whole card is absolutely pristine and even. And I would assume again, and I may be wrong, but somebody would write it on a knee or somehow on not on a desktop, right? And not to speak that the young man like this, we have a photo here of this medic. Here he is, and
Mm-hmm.
the young man like this would rather Twitter
Mm-hmm.
it, or he would put it elsewhere, and he would put it on his phone, and he would post it, because everything else mentioned in this article not
Yeah.
once mentions anybody writing it in a diary with a pen on paper. Everything that he writes about this journalist is written online in closed or open groups of volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and this is quite unique. So that's one of the things that I wanted to mention, and other things you will mention in what you were saying before as well.
Yes, and if I may, I would love to step out to a bigger
Sure.
picture. And for context, there is some truth here. We can know what the truth is. I might not like the story. That doesn't mean it's not true. I might not like the guy who's telling the story, the reporter in this case. That also doesn't mean it isn't true.
Sure.
But that said, let's look at both the story and the reporter. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So you are a journalist. So I think that you think of anything anyone tells you as a journalist. You want to know who is telling me this? What is he telling me? Why is he telling me this? Right?
Yeah, the Socratic thing.
Yes, thank you. So, um, what is this guy telling me? Well, knowing the previous article that he wrote, my suspicion is that he is giving us facts, things that are real, but
Mm.
he is, I suspect, omitting many others. And I suspect that because I know I am familiar with his other big article from Ukraine, and I know that that's what he did in that article.
Mhm.
And also, I know that what he's telling us is not anti Ukraine, it's anti foreign volunteers in Ukraine. And in that way, it's identical to that previous article. So, this is what he's telling us. Who is telling me is this guy, Tom Gibbons Ness. As I
Mhm.
said, I have run into him uh, several times in Ukraine. Um, One time I called his interpreter Vyevchenka. Now I know,
Mhm.
probably I should not have. But I've spoken with him many times. He has gone on an evacuation mission with me. He is uh, he is up there in the world of journalism. He has been he is the international desk. Very
Mhm.
recently, he has transferred to being the New York Times Second Amendment guy, and so that's who he is. And
It means anti Second Amendment guy.
No, he's the Second Amendment guy.
He is the Second Amendment guy. Okay.
When
It's
I
New York
see him,
Times. That's why I have to ask twice.
sometimes we talk about our guns when
Yeah.
I see him. And I am a classic old school American liberal, and I have enough guns and ammunition in my basement to fight a pretty good battle for my neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm really good at it. Okay. I'm really good with pistol, rifle, and medium. Pistol, I am the angel of death. You
Hmm.
cannot hide me. I will come find you. So, when a journalist, as you know, when a journalist asks for money to go somewhere and do a story, the journalist has a pitch. He knows already what his story will be.
Yeah. Yeah. Kevin froze for a second. Kevin hopefully will be back with us um, any moment, and I don't want to start any filler while he's frozen here, but yeah, he's back. Kevin.
Yes. So, journalists make pitches. What was his pitch? Given the articles he published, I'm guessing the pitch was, let me go find bad things about foreign volunteers. That's
Mm-hmm.
certainly what. Um, uh, I think maybe you don't like the New York Times. Um, Statistically speaking, it's somewhat to the left. Its reader base is somewhat to the left. So we're good capitalists. They're making
Mm-hmm.
the product. They're making the product their subscribers want.
Sure.
If you, I don't think it's biased particularly heavily. That doesn't mean that Tom is not biased, right? So Fox News in general can be sane. Then they have fucker Carlson,
Mm-hmm.
who I think is clearly
Yeah. And now it's they don't have him, but he kind of has them in terms of being still
they don't
paid
have him
by Fox
right?
News.
So the context. I think we can know the truth here.
Yeah.
I think we probably will know in detail the truth here. We know who's telling us the story, and this is a journalist who probably has specifically pitched articles against foreign volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And based on his previous stories, we have good reason to think he tells us some facts, but omits many other facts. Yeah.
Yeah. I looked up
So
his name, by the way, and everything like first 6, 8 articles that came up under his name, they are all regarding the failure of Ukraine to fight this war. Unusual frustrations arise in U.S.-Ukraine alliance. Okay, that's legitimate opinion. Second one in the same line. Surprisingly weak Ukrainian defenses help Russian advance. In Ukraine, Russia is inching forward death by death. Um, After 2 years of bloody fighting, Ukraine wrestles with conscription. Everything is kind of, I mean, I understand that situation in Ukraine is not easy, but the headline tells the story, and this is something that is not talking about the effort. Everything is concentrated on the. I mean, there's losing side and there's winning side to every war story, right? So his side is his line of work is writing about the losing, say, ingredient of this whole deadly
we're not
cocktail.
losing. I spent some time recently reading a guy named James Dunnigan. He's a marvelous writer
Hmm.
about war and the practicalities of how it works. And I just read him talking about victory. What counts as victory?
Yeah.
Personally, I think we're winning the war, but
Everybody wants to know, yes, because
let's
I
not
have to
fight that.
reward what I
Let,
said.
let me stick with this article
Sure.
because it's the one that I prepared. So, quick review about uh, capture and handling of prisoners of war. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So the way this is supposed to work is that you indicate that you have surrendered. For example, no weapon, raise your hand. This is hands. This is
Hmm.
internationally agreed. I
Yeah.
will accept that as surrender if you accept that as a sign of surrender. Now, that is context dependent. For example, if you come walking out of the night with your hands in the air, I am probably going to accept that as a surrender. Maybe not immediately, because I don't know who's behind you, but I will probably accept that. On the other hand, if I'm in your trench or you are in my trench, and 1 minute we're fighting, and the next you drop your weapon and raise your hand, guess what? No, I will shoot you at that point. I have, I know 1 second ago you were trying to kill me. This does not mean I'm not trying to kill you. As far as I'm concerned, if 1 second ago you were trying to kill me,
Yeah.
maybe I'll accept that in the right circumstances, maybe I won't. Now, that is surrender. Becoming a prisoner of war is a different process. To become a prisoner of war, you are immobilized and you are searched. In other words, you are fully under control. So, if you, and I will say, this is a job for military police, not the normal soldier. Why? Police
Hmm.
know how to search people. Normal soldiers, that's not part of our training. I'll give you an anecdote. I worked in February, I worked in a stabilization point. Before you come to the stabilization point, we your body is searched by the Viscovi paramedic who brings you to us. Okay. We received a patient, he died, and they searched him afterwards and found a grenade in his pocket. A grenade is not small. You can miss things if you're not trained to search. So once the guy is immobilized and searched, uh, at that point, you are under control, and now you're not surrendering anymore. Now you're a prisoner of war. Okay. Now, the way that typically you are handled here in Ukraine is 24 hours. Uh, we're not nice to you. We're not mean. We don't mistreat you. And this is exactly what we do in the American military. We're not nice to you for 24 hours. We don't mistreat you. After 24 hours, the Ukrainian troops will give the Russian prisoner a cup of tea, a phone, and say, call your mother, tell her you're okay. Okay? Whose side do you think mother is on after that? I think this is the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
So we need that context to evaluate some of the details of this paper. You have addressed the detail of the notebook. I want to address some of the details of the actual context where some of these shooting happened. There were two in total.
Please.
One in particular, I would like to explore. Um, Let me talk about war crimes in general. I was in the US military for 9.5 years, and I am very proud to my soul, to my heart, to my guts. I am proud of those 9.5 years. Why? Because we have one of the most ethical militaries on the planet. We don't rape you. We don't steal from you. We don't kill civilians. Now, do Americans military ever commit war crimes? Yeah, it has happened.
Yes.
It happened in My Lai. It happened in Abu Ghraib. There's a very well known story recently about a Navy SEAL who stabbed a POW in the neck, killed him. Uh, the guy was undergoing surgery. He could not have been more immobilized. But we have war crimes. The British,
Yeah.
an excellent ethical military, they have soldiers who commit war crimes. The French do. Israel does. Here's the thing: in Israel, if you commit a war crime, it will be reported, you will be tried, and if found guilty, you will be punished. In France, in Great in America, if you commit a war crime, it will be reported, you will be
Kevin will be back. He's in a very он очень сложных условиях это делает.
am I
Okay.
back?
Yeah, yeah.
That is a military that you can be proud to serve in. And I am proud of my 9.5 years in the US military. So let's look at what happened here. We have step number one. We have a guy who reported something that he felt was wrong. Good. That's what's supposed to happen. Commander who says, uh, uh, he said,
Kevin. Я надеюсь, что вы потерпите, друзья. Это слишком уникальная программа, чтобы ей пренебречь.
are we good?
Yeah, yeah. Go back.
So the commander says, if anything comes out, I ordered this. This is what's supposed to happen. This is it. There's a point in the article where the reporter said, he says that the beginning of the war crime is the failure to investigate. That's not true. The beginning of the war crime is failure to report. So, for example, recent episode with the Navy SEAL who stabbed a prisoner of war, his buddies reported him. That's the way it's supposed to work. There is stuff, we have this thing, we call it honor. There is stuff that you do not tolerate. Okay? So, globally, I see the picture here as a picture of a horrible thing that might have happened that is being handled as it should be handled. It's reported, the commander takes responsibility, and I think the investigation will happen.
But he says that this medic says that he reported it, and the commander actually responded to that and quite publicly.
Yeah, this is what should happen. War crimes should never happen. When they do, they should be reported and they should be investigated. If punishment is warranted, punishment should be given.
What do you know about Russia's work?
But compared to Russia, the reason I have not left here, the reason that I retired and went on Social Security early at the age of 62 to stay here is the Russian enthusiasm for committing war crimes. I have personally, so far, witnessed 3. I was there for 2 attacks on refugee collection points for evacuation. And I was there for 1 bombing of a rescue crew. We were digging people out of a basement. I do shovel motion. We were doing it with our bare hands. And they came by and double tapped, as they say, the rescuers, us. they seem to encourage them. It's hallucinatory to me, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
the right take on it. It's not our take on it. So, can I tell you a little bit about some of these specifics?
Yes, please.
Okay, as I said, um, surrender is context dependent. You cannot kill a surrendering soldier, but what is recognized as surrendering depends on where you are, and what is happening. For example, uh, as happened here, if you have one guy surrendering, indicating surrender,
Hmm.
the guy next to him is not, and you cannot see behind him exactly what happened here in one of the two reported episodes, that does not count. That's you are to me, if the guy next to you is still fighting and I don't know who is behind you, I cannot have you under control. It's not possible. The article talks about a drone that was able to see this, but what the drone can see is not what the guy on the ground can see.
Absolutely.
The drone knows what's in the trench or the shell hole. The guy on the ground doesn't. Along those lines, there's a part in here relevant to that. And the question of whether or not someone you could not see was still fighting, where he says this. He says, uh, two guys, you can see them stick their head up and look around. And so what he says clearly is that you should conclude there must not have been shooting if they're sticking their heads up and looking around. Guess what? That is not true.
This is how you shoot. You have to get out of the trench, right?
At some point, you have to stick your head up and look around. Now, I will tell you how hard that is. I was talking earlier about this discussion of what counts as victory. And the guy's point is it depends where you are in the chain of command. If you're a general, the definition of victory is political. If you are a colonel, if you are a polkovnik, head of
Hmm.
a company, of a regiment, victory is did the larger operation succeed? It's not defined in terms of you. It's
Hmm.
defined in terms of a bigger picture. Now, for the soldier on the ground, it's quite different. For the soldier on the ground, victory can be a very small thing. Victory, he gives the example, a victory can be you found the nerve to stick your head around a corner and look, not knowing if you're going to get shot. So
Yeah.
relevant to this story. And I will tell you, in 2 years in Ukraine, my personal victory, my big victory, is in the middle of an artillery barrage. I needed to run across a parking lot, and I ran across the parking lot. That's my victory. There's a there's a story behind this I will tell if you want, but that's my victory. I needed
Yes.
to run across the parking lot. Shells were coming in. I had to count the timing and get up and run. Do you want to hear the story? It's one of the
Sure.
few I will
Of
tell.
course, Kevin.
So,
Every bit.
my favorite flower is the chestnut tree. And where I was born and raised, full of chestnut trees.
Kiev's
That's where
famous for chestnut trees, right?
and Kiev and Ukraine are famous for chestnut trees, right?
Yeah.
May of 2022, I went with a wonderful American veteran named Paul Wall. We went to the refugee collection point in Lysychansk to pick up some refugees. And at that point, the Russians started shelling us. I can explain, you want, how I
Go
know
ahead.
they're
Go ahead.
shelling
Tell
us.
us everything you would
A
you
sidetrack
in
on this,
anything.
however. I can, if listeners have questions, how do I know they're shelling us? I can explain. So, a shell hits,
Hmm.
and after artillery, you must look around because for infantry to attack, artillery comes first.
Hmm.
Infantry follows it. So you must look around. Right? So I look up, and in front of my face has fallen a limb off of a chestnut tree. I mean, boom, right?
Wow.
And the it's May, the chestnuts are in bloom, and the little petals have are on the ground. Now, normally, when there is shooting, I am extremely focused. I am in that moment and nowhere else. Okay, but but I can I curse?
You can try. Try me.
All right. I looked at those flowers and I lost my focus. I looked at the petals on the ground and I thought, you can't even leave the flowers alone. So, so I needed to run from where I was across the parking lot to the refugee center to say, when the shelling stops, we have to leave now. Um, uh, so I counted the timing of the shells
Hmm.
and got up to run. Now, I'm going to tell you something no one in Ukraine knows. 6 months before the war started, I had heart surgery. And so, right when my physical therapy, my rehabilitation ended, I left for Ukraine. I was in amazing shape for a 60-year-old man at that time, right? So I started running, but in full body armor, helmet, everything.
Oof.
And I thought, Kevin, you can't do this. You're too old. And then I thought, Dinahoy! And I just kept running, right? Fast as I could. What happened next depends who you ask. My buddy Paul, the American veteran who was there
Hmm.
with me, he says the next shell knocked me down. I think I think I just tripped. In either case, I fell forward. Now, I studied judo for 10 years. I was horrible at it. I won 4 matches. I lost 58 matches. But I'm an expert in falling. Okay.
Hmm.
So I did my judo roll. I got back up and I just kept trucking. That's my victory so far.
Right. Right. I hear you
So,
loud and clear, Kevin. You're 100%.
looking at the details, when the guy says, well, maybe it's okay to shoot at the guy if the other guys could still shoot at you. But there's two guys sticking their head up and looking around. So probably there's no shooting. No, not the case. For
Mm.
those guys, that might be their biggest victory for that day is it was dangerous, but they still stuck their heads up and looked around. Um, I have so many things to say about this. I want to
Yeah,
condense them to one anecdote. Is that okay?
absolutely.
Okay. So, as I said, surrendering is context dependent, and globally, you are making decisions with incomplete information and information whose reliability you don't know. That's life. It's even more the case in combat. And it's easy to misinterpret a situation. I want to tell you how easy it is to do that. Okay. So a lot of my training has involved what's called CQB, close quarters battle. What
Mhm.
that means is, how do you go through a building looking for bad guys and shooting them, but not shooting good guys, hostages, women and children, any non-combatant. Okay. Now, uh, in the United States, it occasionally happens that a police officer will empty a magazine into the back of a man who is running away from him. This is clearly not okay, and it's always bothered. Then, my first time doing a test on CQB, close quarters battle, I shot the guy I was supposed to shoot. I thought he was moving a little bit, so I shot him again. And in the end, I put my whole magazine into that guy. Now, uh, I never did it again. I had an enormous amount of training after that. I learned from that one thing, that first test. Problem we have is most American police officers don't have that training. Fact of the matter is, as far as I know, you can give a police department all the money you want. They will mostly spend it on equipment, not on training. What
Mhm.
I learned from this personally was a very small amount of training could prevent those incidents from happening. Okay? Now, as I progressed through my training,
Mhm.
uh, I was working with a guy one day, and we were having trouble with a specific concept related to going through narrow hallways. We explained it to the instructor. The instructor's an amazing man, and he created a scenario for us such that we both, two guys, not beginners, we both shot the instructor with his hands in the air on his knees. Okay, the guy's going like this, but he was able to get both of us so confused. We shot him from maybe 6 inches away.
I mean,
Like,
you shot him not literally, right? You were
oh,
using.
with training,
Yeah,
training materials. Thank you for making that point.
yeah, because
The instructor
it's not a
was
Bruce Willis
able to,
movie. You look like him, but it's not.
thank you. The instructor was, my cousins all say I look like John Malkovich. I don't know if that's good or bad. I prefer to think good, probably not. Anyways, the instructor was able to create a situation that was so confusing to two people with some experience that we both shot a man on his knees with his hands in the air. Here's my point. Thinking back to particularly to the situation where the guy throws a grenade at a guy with his hands in the air. I can't say at a surrendering guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know he had his hands in the air? I know you don't want to do that. I also know it is really hard to tell what is happening around you sometimes. And that can be true if you're crossing a busy street in Manhattan. And it's a lot truer when it's kind of dark and there's loud noises and people are trying to kill you. And maybe you can't hear quite right because things are going boom near you. It's really hard to tell what's going on sometimes. And it's worth keeping that in mind for the incident where the guy throws a grenade at a guy with his hands in the air. He doesn't know what's in the trench. He doesn't know what the other guy's status is. And the drone can show us a lot. A GoPro recording can show us a lot. Afterwards, after
Sure.
it's all over, in the moment, you don't have access to that information. Okay.
Correct.
the other episode, quote unquote, mercy killing. Um, that's a much harder one to come up with a good picture of. Um, I will say this: the guy who is reported in there, excuse me, as having shot the guy in the back of the head, he is a scumbag. Um, uh, what I can say about him personally
Mentioned
is,
in the article of New York
yeah,
Times,
he
just to
has the
clarify.
call sign Kazakh, and he does anything he can do to find divisions in the volunteer community, especially, and make turn differences into bleeding wounds. Have we ever heard of this before? We have. So most of your listeners, I think, are our age, and they're familiar with Marxism, Leninism, and they know the idea of contradictions as something that you
Yeah,
exploit to bring about uh, called evolutionary change in a society. Um, Russians have been working this through what's called active measures since at least the 1930s. And they were still doing it into the late 20th century. Uh, and Putin, let's recall, was a KGB agent. And there is every reason they're still doing it now.
sure.
So I am watching this guy who personally, of anyone I have met in Ukraine for 2 years, if you asked me who's most likely to be working for the Russians, it'd be this guy. And based on this is one man's opinion, given my personal exposure to him and interactions with him. If he's not actively working for the Russians, then it's a useful idiot, I believe Stalin called it. Uh, this is, if you're thinking, um, how in the world would a Russian agent be in the International Legion?
Hmm.
I'll say this. I will say that the United States had a brief flirtation with active measures early in the Cold War period. One of the things that Americans learned before they stopped trying to mess with something that the Soviets were already very good at was that um, disinformation and misinformation work best if they are coming from someone who is not who they seem to be. In other words, so when we, the Americans, did this, um, we, the CIA, hijacked the covers of some East German magazines and put articles in them that at that time were clearly interpretable as anti Soviet in an East German magazine. So,
Hmm.
the reader, you think you're getting the party line, literally the party line, right? Actually, you're getting some truth that we're feeding you. So, yeah, if I was going to look to create a scandal in the International Legion, that's where I'd put my guy. Is if I
Yeah,
were a
correct. Kevin's with us. He'll unfreeze in a moment because I'm reminding you he's in Ukraine. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and we have very kind of tentative
wait,
connection.
am I back?
Yeah, you are. You are.
So if I were Russian and I wanted to destroy the International Legion, I would want to do it with a legionnaire. That's the best way to do it is with an insider. Now, at this point, I am very deeply into speculation. I will say with absolute confidence that
Hmm.
if this guy not a Russian plant, he is a useful idiot. He is a scumbag who works very hard to create, to widen division community to widen divisions in the volunteer community in Ukraine. And let's remember, this is the way that Soviet active measures work. You take
Kevin will be back. Guys, I'm staying. I'm waiting for Kevin to unfreeze here because of the conditions of our transmission. He's in Ukraine, and our streams meet someplace, over the
that's
Azores.
right, dreams meet someplace in some satellite. Yeah.
Yeah,
So the way active measures work is find a division. If you're trying to get Americans, you
and
work
start
on
poking your
work
finger
rate is
into it.
a good place to start. Tell all of the people on one side, oh man, those racial justice people, they're starting fires and doing all this horrible stuff. Guess what? They're probably not. And at the same time, you tell the people who are fighting for racial justice, oh, guess what? Those bigots and scumbags there's a bunch of them coming for you. Right? That's how active measures work. Find an existing crack and make it bigger. And that's what this guy over and over and over what I have seen him do and what I have personally called him out on in public. So yeah,
Kevin, let
I
me
would,
ask you a question. Can
yeah,
I ask you a question?
of course.
Do you see a lot of foreign volunteers on the Russian side? You see people who are not Russians that would be fighting for Putin.
Only what I see on the news. Now, on our side, um, I have seen wounded and horribly wounded Colombian soldiers, for example. Um, uh, my last crew here in Ukraine, one of the hospitalieri was from Kenya.
Hmm.
And I see foreigners here.
Yeah.
What I see, what I'll tell you how I interpret what I see in the news about foreigners fighting for Russia. Um, it's not clear to me who is a foreigner in the context of the Russian Federation. For example, the Buryat.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think the Russians think that Buryat are Russian. Okay, my understanding is they uh, have a horrible economic situation, and to them, the military is a way to make some money.
Yeah.
I read about foreigners fighting for the Russians, the same story, fighting
Hmm.
for money. Now, to me, as a soldier, the worst, worst, most horrible thing in the world is to kill. Now, to protect Babusia, yeah, I'll do it for that. To kill for money, to me, if you will kill for money, you are scum, absolute scum. I don't even have the words. If you would kill for money, nothing is worse.
Yeah, you're a medic. You brought some supplies with you, and I was proud. I am proud to be part of this whole process of our fundraising for the medical supplies for you to bring to Ukraine. And I know that it's going to be put to best use possible, and I know that it won't end up anywhere else but in the battlefield or where you train the Ukrainians to do the same thing as you do.
May I?
Sure.
The last load that I brought is a 20-minute walk from the Russians. It is right up at the front. Not send you a picture. I'll
Yeah.
send you some pictures of the little aid station that we put together in the basement of a destroyed house. Um,
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Next time I'll bring Boris. He's traveling these days. That's why I didn't want to bother him. But he'll be back on his home base, and we'll connect the three of us, and we'll have a talk. And I may have a chance to interpret. Maybe you have a better connection. I just didn't want to waste our time together. And maybe people can. I can tell you, друзья, после нашей программы можно будет смотреть, включить субтитры. Они будут работать, скорее всего, потому что они должны обсчитать. Сейчас они деактивированы не по моей вине, не включаются субтитры, потому что так работает YouTube, они не знают, что мы скажем, они должны цензурировать нас. There's censorship problem too.
Я кажу, що дивно, це не коли ми не маємо світло, коли ми не маємо інтернет. Дивно, диво, чудо. Це коли у нас є інтернет, у нас є війна. І час від часу у нас є інтернет, у нас є світло. Вау! Yeah.
Kevin, one last question. Does Starlink work still in Ukraine? Is it they're using it, Starlink, the Musk's thing, or it's something
It's
else?
dependent. It needs two things. One is the Starlink needs to work.
Mm-hmm.
Zero is you need to have electricity.
Yeah.
So there are two ways to fail. No
Okay.
electricity, or you have electricity but Starlink doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. So when you have two, you're king, right?
Sorry?
You're on
When I
top
have
of the world. When you have two, you're the king, right?
oh yes, it's amazing. It
So
is
listen, I
so strange to me. When I was in the Navy, in the
uh-huh.
beginning of my time, I was on a ship. My kind of ship worked with a carrier group.
Mm-hmm. It's coming back. He'll be back. Kevin.
You got close enough for them to send a helicopter. They
Mm-hmm.
would lower down a bag with your mail and take up a bag with the outgoing mail.
Right.
Right? That's it. That's when you get. That's when and how you got
Like
mail.
well-time pirates. Okay.
Yeah. And now, oh man, if I can
Yeah.
charge a phone and if I have electricity and internet access, I can send a text to my 9-year-old niece and say, "Oh, your braids look so wonderful today." She's studying Ukrainian. It's amazing. Oh my God.
Kevin, what's the fighting spirit of Ukrainians? I understand that you Americans are always optimistic and looking at the bright side of things. I'm just half kidding. But what about the Ukrainians? What they think of the situation right
It's
now? It's
incredible. It's incredible. The enthusiasm here for negotiating with Putin must be 2% tops, I would think. Um, think about this. The logistics system here is destroyed.
okay.
Um, we, for months, uh, could shoot back maybe one or two shells against a barrage. This is not a secret. This was in international news. If you were going to quit, that's when you would quit, right?
Right.
I had a guy come in February when we were in those conditions. He came into the stabilization point where I worked at that time. He was so tired, he fell asleep on the table. While we're working on him, he was having nightmares. He screamed, he screamed and screamed. When we were finished, he woke up. We said, "You're going to the hospital." And he said, "My boys are here. I'm going back to the trench." I see that over and over and over. How could this be the case? If you think about this. In the United States, in the world, you hear about the worst war crimes. You don't hear about the rest, the little war crimes.
Yeah.
Anger alone is what has kept me going for 2 years. These guys have wives, mothers, children behind them. Hell yes, we're fighting. And if you ask me, why do I say we're winning? It's because we're not dead, and they're Putin does does not control. Uh, we don't have Yanukovych as our president. Okay,
Yeah.
we elected our president. I didn't. Ukraine
Yeah.
elected president. It's not Yanukovych, and the flag is not Russian Federation. I think we are winning this war now. Might not
Kevin.
look like that to the general, I don't know. But to me, I see our boys with incredible energy. I see our girls who will leave their children at home and go to the front and stay here. And this is the thing without which you cannot fight, you cannot win. You must have logistics, you must have training, but none of that helps if you don't have heart. And these guys have heart.
Yes. 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 We know that, and people who watch this program and much more people are with you, and whoever you are, you're fighting on the side of good. And those who lived in Russia and those who live here now and still lives in Russia, the growing number of people from Russia are watching this program, which is in the
Yeah.
mood. It's not much different from what we just had here. We don't
Mhm.
kind of say things that are not proper
Mhm.
things to say about the current situation, so to speak. So it's very important, Kevin, what you do, and we wish you every luck in every kind of in every language. We wish you luck, and to all your buddies.
Спасибо большое, дуже дякую вам. And let me say,
Sure,
in a war where disinformation is one of the enemy's major weapons, the biggest defense is the truth. The people who get the truth out there are journalists. And I appreciate, my friends appreciate, my family appreciates what you do on this show. So thank you so much for doing that.
Kevin.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
so
getting
very
us
much
through
for
this.
saying this, and I will try to live up to what you just said, because there's
Super.
always something to jump
Слава
over.
Україні! А сильним данк.
Yeah, Героям
All right.
слава.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Да, друзья, вот такой вот у нас есть друг Кевин.